Welcome to the 3-0 show, part of the Athletic Baseball Show for Thursday, October 6th. This is our wild card round preview. Of course, a new playoff format this year. So we have 4 series that'll be getting underway on Friday. Should be a great weekend of baseball. The field is set. We're actually recording this on Wednesday, just before day 162 or
There
game
is no
162 day.
juice left today.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Is
There's
there
nothing there.
anything? There's nothing.
No,
There's
nothing.
nothing. I think everything's set. I don't think anybody's moving.
Which is wonderful for recording purposes. So, the things we don't know who's going to start game 1 for, I think, 7 of the 8 teams playing on Friday. The only one we know is Alek Manoah is going to go for the Jays at this time.
We have some
But
pretty good guesses. We'll give our best guesses.
educated guesses, and more importantly, we'll get to predictions for each of these series as we
Sure to
run
go
through the
wrong.
matchups.
We need a drop for
Guaranteed.
that. Predictions. Sure to go wrong.
I tend to waffle a lot, just like you did throughout last postseason. So get your maple
Take my
syrup
lead.
ready. Yeah, because I feel good about waffling. I like waffles.
Yeah, you gave me that waffle iron. We've been using it a lot. I am the king of waffles, both literally and figuratively.
It's a great waffle iron.
The key is you actually want the batter to be pretty thin, almost as thin as you can get it. It's really
That's
key.
it. That's the key.
Yeah, because waffles, like when the batter is thick, you're just like, oh God, there's so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you want to be fluffy.
When they're thin, they're just like nice and light and airy.
You want the waffles to not fill the entire waffle iron. You want the craggly edges too.
Oh, yeah.
Fill like 80% of your waffle iron.
That is also key. I don't always get that right. At least the first one I like over pour, and the second one I'm like, okay, I got this right.
Yeah, first one's kind of always a practice waffle. Anyway, people did not come for waffle tips. They came for wild card round talk. I'm pretty sure if you want more waffle content, you'll have to tweet at us, and we can provide that via Twitter. Let's start with the Cardinals and Phillies series. This will be in St. Louis. The Cardinals, of course, won the NL Central. The Phillies, the last wild card team in. The winner of this series will eventually go play the defending champions in Atlanta in the next round. The Cardinals were 15th in Major League Baseball in homers last season. They're 8th this year. League-wide, power is down, but they've sustained power or increased relative to what was going on. They're 4th in team strikeout percentage at 19.9%. The top 5 teams in this category all made the playoffs this year. And I was reading Katie Woo's roster projection for the Cardinals for the series. They're likely to carry 5 starters, even though they're only 3 games, because there are some concerns. And you found some issues with Adam Wainwright, specifically with his velocity down the stretch.
Well, I think overall, he just doesn't look 100%. Even when he was doing his best, I think he was a little bit more about command, especially slider command. I think that was his best feature when he was at his best. You can just see from the walk rates, actually, that he's not all the way back. He walked 5 against 1 strikeout against the Brewers. He's generally had a 5.5 walks per 9 since he's been back. And the velo has been better. He was at 95, 94 before he got hurt. He's been sitting 92 recently. So I think the best use of him is more of a security blanket. I think he is the guy you keep in reserve. I think him and Matz are the guys that you keep in reserve, because as much as I love Miles Mikolas, and I'm throwing him in game 1, and as much as I think Jose Quintana has had a resurgence that's based mostly on really good command and just knowing his stuff, I want to have security blankets for both of them. And then I especially want one for Adam Wainwright. Ooh, good Lord. His max velo, Adam Wainwright's max velo in October is 87 miles an hour. He's down more than anybody else in baseball since spring in terms of starters, and his max velo is down with it. Maybe he's saving bullets, but I would feel much better, when I'm pitching Adam Wainwright. I would love to have Flaherty and maybe Matz there, and it's an all hands on deck type of game. because if he comes out throwing 87s, the Phillies lineup is pretty good.
One thing that's really important for this Cardinals team is that last-minute acquisition of Jordan Montgomery at the trade deadline. Since joining the Cardinals, a 3.11 ERA, a 1.08 WHIP. This is a guy that, without him, I would feel really bad about their rotation the further they go into the postseason. But with him, I actually feel quite a bit better.
Yeah, and I think, that makes that game 3 even more intriguing. You've got Adam Wainwright. You've got the security blanket that I proposed with Jack Flaherty. And you've got Jordan Montgomery. You could just start Jordan Montgomery and turn Adam Wainwright into the security blanket. So there's going to be a lot of gamesmanship about game 3 if it comes down to it. There's going to be all hands on deck. It's going to be righty, lefty, starters, relievers. There's going to be a lot there. But I also think that they might factor into game 2. Flaherty, Montgomery, Wainwright, any one of those could come into game 2 if Quintana struggles. So this is going to be a team that I think hopes Miles Mikolas goes deep and really puts everybody else on the table. Why you're not giving Jordan Montgomery just one of these starts is because you've got Adam Wainwright. It seems like you'd give the start to the guy who's used to it, and maybe, just maybe, because Jordan Montgomery stumbled a little bit down the stretch with a 4.36 ERA in September with a couple bad starts against playoff caliber squads like the Dodgers and I'll call the Brewers playoff quality. Sorry.
That's uncalled for.
Yeah, it really was. But, Montgomery does help me towards the Cardinals on this, because that just gives them a lot of options. And even if, the Phillies overall starting pitching quality is better, I like that the Cardinals have some options if they want to go short on the guys they do have.
Yeah, I mean, this points back to a bigger question about the rotation as a whole. How well does it hold up against playoff lineups? They went 3-4 in the regular season against the Phillies and the Braves, too, if you're looking ahead to their matchup potentially after this round. Only 4 games over 500 against non-NL Central clubs. Like this is the issue that both Central divisions have had.
It's an eternal question, right? It's like,
it comes up every year.
How do you gauge quality if you don't have quality opposition?
Yeah, you can only play who's on the schedule, and maybe in future years this will be less of a question because we'll have a more balanced schedule. But as much as Miles Mikolas has shown us that what he did back in 2018 wasn't a fluke by basically repeating that, pitching at that same sort of level, if not even slightly better this year,
he's really good.
I still, if he's your one compared to other teams,
like Aaron Nola or Wheeler,
yeah, you're giving something up in the starting pitching matchups against any team you face in the NL right now. That's just the way the Cardinals are. Now, again, the lineup is good, and the secondary contributions in the second half of the season were outstanding because you had Albert Pujols with a magical second half, 314, 377, 681 with 20 home runs since July 1st from Albert Pujols. Remarkable. Lars Nootbaar has been very good in the second half, 371 OBP since July 1st, 12 homers in 267 plate appearances. So you put those guys behind Goldie and Arenado, and the lineup is better than we're used to. So they've taken a step forward there. Compared to where they were a year ago.
Is this going to be a mash fest? Is this going to be like high scoring games?
I don't think so, though. Like I don't think the Phillies pitching is bad. I think the Phillies pitching is very good. The starting pitching at
this
the top
lineup
is excellent,
good, and the Phillies lineup is good, and the starting rotation for the Cardinals is not great. I don't know. These could be some high scoring games. Here's a weakness on the other side for the Phillies, the bullpen. Now, it doesn't, like, for the full season, you're like, oh no, the Phillies bullpen this year was 9th in baseball. Not bad. They really improved that. I have to, by the setup, you already know, they were not as good in the last 30 days, and it actually gets even worse in the last 14 days. Their WAR is good, but they started to walk 4.5 per 9 almost. And then if you kind of drill down into it, here are some concerning numbers. David Robertson has walked has walked 12.5 batters per nine in the last 5 appearances. Seranthony Dominguez has walked 12.5 batters per nine in his last 5 appearances. So those two are not running on all cylinders. And how relevant is it? Is someone like I know Andrew Bellotti, is he going to be a playoff reliever? Christopher Sanchez, is he going to be a playoff reliever? Chris Davinsky, you really start to focus down on 3 or 4 relievers. And I think for the Phillies right now, Seranthony Dominguez looks like he doesn't know where the plate is. Robertson doesn't look like where the plate is, and you might be down to Eflin and Alvarado as Zach Eflin and Jose Alvarado is like the 2 relievers you can trust. So there is, if you can pepper away at Wheeler, who may not have as much depth in terms of how far he can go into the game, or if you manage to get to Nola early, then there might be some opportunities for the Cardinals offense in the 6th and 7th innings.
I think how teams in general choose to use the starters that won't have to make a start in these short series is one way of really covering up some flaws. If you have questions about your bullpen depth, well, guess what? Your 4th starter and your 5th starter, if they're good, can actually step in and chew up a lot of innings. And then you can shorten up to your A bullpen, at least for now. You can hide the flaw for one round and see how it happens to bite you later on. I'm a little higher on this bullpen than you are. I'm not as worried about the recent control issues that you mentioned for Dominguez and Robertson. I think compared to past Phillies bullpens, this is an improvement, right? This is more of like a league-wide top 10 sort of bullpen, just in terms of WAR. So it's acceptable. It's a playoff level group. Eflin in the bullpen is new, by the way. Do you think this is good? Do you think this is actually a good long-term usage for him? And do you think the ceiling is actually a lot higher for Eflin working in these short stints as opposed to continuing to go down the path of, starting every 5th day and being more of a back end sort of starter most of the time? He's shown flashes of being something more. So I don't know if this is permanent, but how good can he be in short relief?
Well, he's got the 94 mile per hour velocity, which he hasn't seen since 2018. I think that it's been good for rejuvenating his fastball, and he's never had an amazing fastball. So I do think it's a good idea. I think that the Phillies may end up having to do a little bit more of that. They've already sort of been using Noah Syndergaard in sort of tandem with Bailey Falter. And I think that's going to have to continue, because for me, I like Nola and Wheeler, and I think there's a very clear advantage, as we said, over the Cardinals starting pitchers for those two. But when it comes to Gibson, Suarez, Falter, and Syndergaard, I am just looking at matchups. That's almost a de facto bullpen game for me, because A, if it goes to 3, it is everybody, all hands on deck, and B, I'm not going to stick Kyle Gibson in there and let him put 3 guys on. You know what I mean? I'm just not. If Kyle Gibson puts a second guy on, Syndergaard's up in the pen or Suarez is up in the pen. So, and in fact, I may even have somebody up in the pen in the first inning, no matter what is happening. So I think that game 3, if it goes to game 3, I think that'll be really fascinating, because it'll be a lot of pitchers that are used to bulk, a lot of pitchers like, Wainwright and Gibson up front. And if maybe one of them has a great command day, and that you could easily, either one of them could easily throw 5 innings of 1-run ball, but will either team even let them give in a run? How quickly will they reach for their bullpens in that game 3? And I would assume very quickly. So I think it'll be a lot of starting pitchers and relievers going 1 inning in that game 3 if it goes to 3.
Yeah, I think many of these series are coin flips. I think this is a coin flip. I think these teams match up really well. And the big thing that closes the gap on these two teams is the Phillies starting pitching being better. They have the edge, I would argue, in each of the first 2 games with Nola and Wheeler, even though Miles Mikolas has been great so far this season. I don't want to undersell what he's done, but when you're talking about playoff caliber lineups, I trust the Phillies' top 2 starters more than I trust the Cardinals' top 2 starters. So I'll pick the upset here. I'll probably regret it. If Britt were here, she'd laugh in my face and just take the Cardinals and cruise to a wild card round victory. But I'll be the dum-dum that takes Philadelphia to pull off an upset.
Yeah, I'm about to take the Cardinals. I just, I tend to fixate on starting pitcher matchups, and so most of the time I would have taken the Phillies. But Steven Matz in your back pocket is an interesting thing to have with such a lefty lineup with the Phillies. I feel like, being able to deploy him and get to your bullpen. They've got a really good bullpen. They also they pick the ball well. So there's not going to be, I doubt there's going to be a big defensive gaffe that leads to runs for the Cardinals, whereas the Phillies are liable for that to happen at any moment.
Oh, yes. The Phillies' defensive shortcomings, which I've been concerned about all year, picking them anyway. Bryce Harper, since coming back from the IL, not being the same player, picking him anyway. He's hit 227, 325, 352 with 3 homers.
I'm sure the thumb still hurts.
Has to. It absolutely has to. What's helped them is that JT Realmuto has been a top 10 offensive player by WRC Plus going back to July 1st. So he's basically filled the Harper void. Kyle Schwarber is mashing, second only in Aaron Judge to homers season long and in the second half of the year.
Will there be a stolen base in this series?
Oh, I would bet. Yeah, I'd bet yes. Someone will get
like Realmuto, maybe. Like I like Realmuto is like maybe the top catcher against the run game this year. So he's an amazing player. There's a great Matt Gelb piece about how he controls the running game and is such a good runner. But yeah, the Phillies just came to town, and Kyle Schwarber, I love him to death, but there were a couple where I was like, did you move? Or are you just so slow that I didn't see it? Like a couple balls to the wall where I was like, live, I was like, okay. Yeah, he's not very good.
Brandon Marsh has it. It's covered.
Yeah, and then Brandon Marsh like had some ball like fall like 3 feet away from it.
Brandon Marsh,
I do think he's a good center fielder. He's fine. He's fine. But he recently had a couple gaffes where I was like, oh boy.
Main thing for me, starting pitching, again, Phillies starting pitching, very good. Second only behind Houston in Fangraphs WAR this season as a group. It'll help them more if they can advance than it will help them in a 3-game series, but it's still a strength for them that a lot of teams wish they had in many cases. Let's get to the Mets and Padres. Simple question to start. Do you think too much is made of the Mets' lack of homers? They're 16th in MLB in homers this season.
Well, teams that out homer their opponents in the postseason usually win.
Usually.
And teams that actually get a big proportion of their offense from homers also retain that offense in the postseason. That's a finding Ben Lindbergh had. So yeah, there's something there. But we also have, on the other hand, that teams that don't strike out do disproportionately well in the playoffs. And as a team, the New York Mets this year had the 3rd best strikeout rate. They're not necessarily Cleveland, but they're also not necessarily Cleveland when it comes to power, right? So look at the comparison to the Houston Astros. 19.5% strikeout rate for the Houston Astros, 19.7 for the Mets. A 176 isolated slugging for the Astros and a 152 for the Mets. The Guardians, for example, are 129. So, yes, they don't hit enough, and it would be great to have Starling Marte hit enough for power, and it would be great to have Starling Marte healthy. And there are some questions, but I think what's being missed in how that series played out is that the Mets are still a really damn good team, and a team that won 100 games on their own can survive, especially a team that's built for depth, can survive missing Starling Marte. And I have to see them as the prohibitive favorite in this series.
Yeah.
Despite the seedings looking so close.
Right. I mean, that's just the way things had to work. But the Mets are third in WRC plus as a team. They're sixth league wide in runs. They've scored more runs than the Phillies, the Astros, the Padres, the Guardians, the Mariners, and the Rays. Some of those
Yeah.
teams we talk about as having issues scoring runs, but we don't talk about the Phillies, the Astros as teams that have trouble scoring runs. We shouldn't talk about the Mets as a team that has trouble scoring runs. They did at the deadline add some thump off the bench, so they got a little more power than they had when the season started. The Starling Marte situation, I think, is important. He might not be 100% even if he's cleared to play with that finger injury. He might be 70% himself, and
Yeah.
that's a tougher call to make in terms of pushing him out there for every single plate appearance, possibly pinch hitting at various points. But the story with the Mets, you want to tell yourself a good story about the Mets if you're a Mets fan? Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer are healthy. Chris Bassett's healthy. Carlos Carrasco and Taijuan Walker are healthy too. But I'll say it again, Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer are healthy. You have those two guys at the front of your rotation, and you might have the best closer in baseball in the back with Edwin Diaz. You got a lot of things going right on your team right now. And
Yeah.
the Padres are one of those teams that, because of the really flashy moves at the deadline, adding Hader, adding Juan Soto, adding Brandon Drury, going all in for this season. At the time, we were expecting Tatis to come back too. Of course, that suspension has kept that from happening. But this is still, even though the players they acquired, Josh Bell is part of that group too, they've generally underperformed expectations. Josh Hader appears to be back on track these last few weeks. That's a great sign for them. Elite Josh Hader is absolute filth to deal with.
They've got some good arms in the pen. Yeah.
Bullpen's still good. Starting rotation's really good too. And Blake Snell has been a top 10 starting pitcher in the second half by WAR. He's pitched very well since the start of July.
Yeah.
So you think about Darvish and Musgrove and Snell. I would say this version of Mike Clevenger that we've seen this season is not totally unlike what we've seen with Noah Syndergaard between his time with the Angels and Phillies, where
Not quite back to where he was.
not the guy he used to be. Still, if you use him the right way in a playoff series, probably better than what other teams have out there. So the pitching is still a strength, even if there are some questions about, especially the secondary group of bats behind the likes of Machado and Soto. But I'm still not going to sit here and look at what Juan Soto has done since this trade and say, the Padres just aren't that dangerous. Soto's not himself. Everything starts over. Everything resets. He's played on this stage before. He's played well on this stage before.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be a good series. I just think having both deGrom and Scherzer healthy has been such a key for the Mets World Series chances all season long that they're actually at that point in October is exciting for all of us, but it's also exciting for Mets fans. I think that's the main reason why they come away and win this series.
I'm a numbers guy, so I know it's very hard to predict postseason ball, but when you look at the numbers, there's no unit on the Padres that you take over the Mets. For example, let's just take the last 30 days offense. I'm doing that because the Padres changed their lineup so heavily at the deadline. The Mets have scored 30 more runs than the Padres in the last 30 days. They've struck out less than the Padres. They've walked more than the Padres. They've hit for more power. I'll take the Mets offense, as it stands. Then you look at the pitching. If you look at the starters, I don't even have to look at any numbers. I'm going to take the Mets starters. I'm sorry, deGrom and Scherzer. And then you have sort of a Carrasco Bassett manwich for the game 3. I'm taking that. I guess I have not looked at fielding stats, and you can't really do a 30-game split, but and then the fielding numbers aren't that great. But Fangraphs has the Mets and Padres as pretty close, but the Mets ahead of the Padres. Am I missing something on defense? Do you think one is clearly better than the other?
Not really. No.
They've got some relative strengths and weaknesses that are different, but overall, I would call them above average defenses. So I'd give that maybe a tie. And then in the bullpen, yes, I really do think that Hader is back. And I do think that I like Robert Suarez, and I like some of those. I like Pierce Johnson. I like some of those relievers in San Diego. And in fact, over the last 30 days, the Padres have had a slightly better WAR by 0.1. That's not enough for me to take it, because the Mets bullpen has struck out 12 batters per nine and walked 2 batters per nine in the last 30 days. Like, the Mets bullpen is rolling right now, and I'll take Diaz over Hader. So, I think, with May healthy and with a couple of those guys, I'm just taking the Mets relievers, I'm taking the Mets starters, and I'm taking the Mets lineup.
I guess the best defensive metric I can throw at you that favors the Padres would be outs above average. Statcast has them at 30, second only to Arizona for the season. So the Mets are at 10, by the way. That's 8th league-wide. Runs prevented, they've got the Padres at 25 and the Mets at 8. So
I think even if you gave the Padres defense over the Mets, it's not enough for me to change my pick.
I just think this format, the best of 3, favors teams that when you make them smaller are better. And the Mets are one of those teams that, even though they have more depth than usual, when you make them small, when you make an NBA Jam equivalent of the Mets, they get really strong. And the rotation is a perfect reflection of that, with just the top 2 starters they have, right? So maybe some of the flaws the Mets have are going to be bigger issues in longer series. Like
Diaz, Ottavino, May, Lugo, full stop. Right? Makes them a better team.
Mm-hmm.
Scherzer, deGrom, 2 out of 3 starts. Yeah. I know the Braves just swept them, but you also know Scherzer's like nutty, and deGrom is, probably is the best pitcher in the game for one game.
Scherzer's probably out there running stairs right now.
Or staring through some stairs.
Well, both.
It looks like he could stare through things.
Yeah, no, I think he
if
does.
There's anybody who was who's it, Cyclops? The guy
from X-Men,
yeah. It's him. Anyone could stare and explode your heart. I just had a piece, a column come out where I just talked to Max Scherzer about Stuff Plus, and he's like an intense dude. I think I don't think he hates me or anything, but like, he's like just going through and like telling me why you can't put all the pitching into one number, and this is what you're missing, and this is what you're missing, and this is what you're missing.
I think that's probably a very spirited conversation.
It was
pretty wish I'd been there for
that. And we got Trevor May involved, so there was like a 3-way conversation there, and it was generally good. I was glad to have Trevor May there because
it softens the conversation.
He's also like more pro analytics, so that was
right. Yes,
a little bit of help there.
You get a bridge. You get a little bit of a bridge. You get some comic relief. Both good things to have.
We could have used some comic relief. Like if only Adam Dunn had been there.
Haven't seen or heard from Adam Dunn in a while. I wonder what he's up to. Is he playing pickleball somewhere? That's what everyone's doing. Everyone's playing pickleball somewhere.
That'd be amazing. Pickleball championships. Adam Dunn versus Jeremy Lin.
Who'd win? You and me, or Adam Dunn and Jeremy Lin? I think we're giving up a little athleticism there.
Yeah, I'll take the more pro
and court coverage. The court coverage for those 2 guys.
That's right.
All right. Well, we're both on the Mets in this series. Again, it doesn't mean we don't like the other side. Padres are a fun team. They deserve to be here. All the best to them. But the Mets just seem like they've got a little more firepower up top, and that's going to make a difference in this short series. Let's go to the AL side.
This one.
The Guardians and Rays series is guaranteed to be the earliest start time every single day that they play, right? By far. Yeah. Like the least appealing game from a national TV audience perspective.
8 a.m. Pacific time start, they would do it.
If they could move this game to London and try to grow playoff baseball in Europe, I think Major League Baseball would do it.
If they could have them play at midnight for Tokyo,
Yeah. Which this game in a lot of ways, it's the Spider-Man meme, right? It's the two frugal organizations that are very
Oh,
well run, kind
yes,
of
but
staring and
very
pointing at each other.
different in some key ways, though.
Different methodologies within being frugal, but frugal and
Mhm.
successful, right? That's the overarching theme for these two teams. The winner of this
One of the
series goes to face the Yankees.
one of these teams will be the first team to be sellers at the deadline and win the World Series.
Did the Guardians even do that?
Yeah, I don't know, but I could see it happening.
The Guardians were just when you're outside with your dogs and you see like a bunny rabbit and the rabbit's defense mechanism is to stand still, just stand as still as possible and hope that the dog could stop seeing it. That's what the Guardians did at the trade deadline, and that's part of the reason why I was I was so opposed to picking them throughout the second half. I thought, no, the
They did
Minnesota's going to
nothing
get
to improve
healthy.
their team. They
The
could have
White
gotten a
Sox are going
power
to do it.
bat. They should have gotten a power bat.
They could have done that. They have they have prospects for days. We talked on this podcast about the Guardians having enough prospects. If they wanted to be the team to go get Juan Soto, they could have done it. They
Mhm.
easily could have done it. They could have topped the offer that the Padres made to the Nationals. The Guardians are that good as an organization. And then I thought they didn't trade those guys. Many of those top prospects are at AA and higher. Maybe we're going to see those players down the stretch. Mostly, no. We didn't see that group of players down the stretch. So, for all the things I thought they could do to either get better with a trade, to promote from within, they didn't do it. And I thought maybe that's going to cost them. Nope, wrong. The rest of the AL Central folded up. Guardians played well when they needed to. They're a different kind of team from the playoff teams, right? They steal a lot of bases. They're third in Major League Baseball in steals. That's easily the highest among playoff teams this year. 119 stolen bases. Rangers led the league, if you care, 128. I think what's working for the Guardians right now, is very similar to what worked for the Royals back in 2014 and 2015. It's a loaded bullpen. They've got speed. They play good defense. And it's just a different sort of build than most of the other teams that we see playing baseball in October.
There's so many fascinating matchup parts to this. So you just brought up the fact that it's the Go-Go Guardians. Nice. Go-Go Guardians.
Did you just make that up?
I did. Just came.
Very, very well done. You do
Anyway,
get paid to use words for a living, so
the Go-Go Guardians are number one in the last month. I don't know. You said maybe it's over the season, the same thing. But the Rays are 23rd in stolen bases against, as in a good way.
they control the running game. So they can take away that strength.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Tyler Glasnow is one of the worst. And so he doesn't figure into these numbers very much because he only had 2 starts.
Right.
So they may go. It's always normally you take the stolen bases off the pitcher. So Glasnow comes in, he really doesn't want to let anybody on base, which maybe he doesn't, but he also has walked guys in the past. So I think there's a fascinating little bit of a storyline there. But then also, when it comes to the starting rotation, so if you look, if you just sum up the threesome and the foursome, it's probably Bieber, McKenzie, Quantrill versus McClanahan, Glasnow, Springs, Rasmussen.
Yeah.
So that's your foursome, threesome. You sum them up. Obviously, the Guardians trio has pitched 100 innings more. They're more bulky, right? They've won 7 more games. So they've, done things that we've traditionally in the past looked at the starters. The Rays throw 2 miles an hour harder. The Rays foursome stuff plus is 113. The Guardians is 95. For the starters. And yet they've pitched both to 2.6 ERA for the Rays, 3 ERA for the Guardians. And they've suppressed runs. They've done really well. On paper, I think some people might favor the Guardians rotation. I'm taking the Rays rotation. But they both have bottom 5 batting average on balls in play this year, meaning that they are really, really good at placing their defenders and making the most out of the defensive. In fact, the Padres have hired a Rays defensive coordinator. The Red Sox took elements of the Rays defensive situation. I've been hearing this from a certain outfielder who's played in all these places. That gets annoyed about these things, but they are very stringent about where they place their guys. They've got it all game planned out before the game starts, and I'm assuming the Guardians are the same way. So the defense, the run suppression will be elite on both of these teams. The rotations have gotten to similar numbers, but the Rays have done it with better stuff. So I'm pretty squarely taking the Rays rotation. If we're going to go unit by unit, I'm taking the Rays rotation. I'm going to call it an even on the defense. And running game, there's some strengths, but there's some strengths on the other side. I think they might cancel each other out. So the most fascinating is this very different offensive styles. The Rays are a little bit more strikeout, hope to get hot, hope to hit a homer or two, hope to walk. And the Guardians are trying to string together singles, which has traditionally among analysts been a thing that you don't aim for because singles are the biggest source of noise. Singles are the worst thing to depend on.
Yeah, I understand. I understand that. It totally makes sense. And I'm not here to refute that as as a reason to be skeptical of a team. I guess the thing that I look at with the Guardians is that even though their method is so different, and even though we might look at the Rays method as more palatable if we're choosing between the two of how we were going to build a team, is like which one's going to be? Is it more like the Guardians or the Rays? We skew more toward the Rays. They're just different paths to a similar outcome as far as the actual production. And I think
low scoring games.
Low scoring games. I mean, it's a 101 WRC plus for the Rays this season. It's a 98 for the Guardians. It's not really a whole lot to separate them. Cleveland gets to play the whole series at home. We don't get a full Tyler Glass now. We get about 80% of Tyler Glass now from a workload perspective. I know the Rays bullpen is deep, always has a lot of weapons where they can, whenever they need to, throw different looks at you.
But they're not healthy. They just lost Colin Pache.
Yeah, Pache, yeah.
To an injury. So right now they're not as deep as they normally are. I would trust Fairbanks and Jason Adam, and then I'm not as sure who I'm trusting beyond that.
Yeah. So I like Shane McClanahan more than Shane Bieber, just in terms of which pitcher would I choose if my season were on the line. That's a close enough matchup too, where the Guardians could still hang around in that game.
And if they take any advantage, I'm taking the Cleveland bullpen squarely over the Tampa bullpen.
Right. And then I think when I look at the Rays, Wander's been productive since coming off the IL, but not hitting for power. Yeah, 1 homer and 97 plate appearances since coming off the IL, 7.2% K rate. Just remarkable. Wander Franco's hit tool is absurd. 322, 381, 471, but 1 home run. And I think we've talked about
Cleveland
this
made the whole plane out of Wander Franco.
Yeah, it's Jose Ramirez and it's Andres Jimenez,
who's had his own injuries. He had a thumb injury and he's been not the same since.
Yeah, he's been down relative to what he was doing in the first half, especially when he looked like he was an MVP candidate at that point. I mean, that was the start of the season he had. But Andres Jimenez has taken a big step forward this year. We've seen pretty steady production from Josh Naylor. I look at this group and I see just enough for them to get it done in this series. I'm back and forth on this one. I think this is one of the most difficult series of the 4 to predict. Probably the most difficult. There's only 4, so one of the most difficult. Like, come on, just pick one. This is the most difficult series to predict. I'm going to take Cleveland. I don't even think they have that much of a home field advantage if we're talking about how they've played at home versus how they played on the road this season. So it's not necessarily because of that. I just think they can match up fine with the Rays. And I think this is a Rays team that doesn't quite have that secondary level of offensive contributor that I like as much as we've liked them in past years. I think there are some legitimate questions in terms of how they're going to put runs on the board in every series they play in the postseason. And then the last question on this series I have for you is, does recent form matter? Does limping into the postseason, record-wise, playing very poorly in your last 10 games, entering the postseason, does that really matter? Because that's the other issue with the Rays. I'm not downgrading them for it, but I think some people might be.
Yeah, unfortunately, the numbers say no. There's not much relationship between your September record and your October record. However, I think the reason that those numbers don't give us a neat and tidy narrative is because there are different ways to a bad record. So, for example, there was a bad record. The Yankees, the year they won it in 2000, I think they were below 500 in September, and they won it all. They were mostly healthy. It was just poor play, which is almost better than, losing guys or having guys come have a hamate bone problem where, like where they're still, they're playing through pain or whatever. When I see this Rays offense, I see that, I don't think the power is going to be there because of the hamate injury. I know it's not a one-to-one relationship. It's not because he had a hamate bone injury he doesn't have power. I think that usually there's some pain there, and if you have pain, then you're not as good of a hitter. And some guys can hit through it. Matt Olson had a hamate bone injury and hit for power when he came back. Other guys are maybe more affected by it. So I just don't see, Matty Margot is just coming back, but they lost Pache with the injury coming and going, to be more succinct. With the injury comings and goings, I think this is a worse team than if you look at full season numbers for the Rays. And if you look at recent numbers, you just see a lot of strikeouts and no power from the team in general. You see a bullpen that I think only goes 2, maybe 3 deep. And so I think you see a lot of flaws there that Cleveland can exploit. So I'm taking the Cleveland offense over the Tampa offense by a nose. And despite the fact that I'm taking the Tampa rotation over the Cleveland rotation, I'm clearly taking the Cleveland bullpen over the Tampa bullpen. And so that leaves me to pick the Guardians in this series.
2 out of 3 of those categories go to the Guardians. Might be 2 out of 3 games wise too. Wouldn't it all be surprising if this took a full 3 games to iron out between these two clubs? One more series to get to. I don't want to send one of these teams home. It's the Blue Jays and Mariners. I want these teams to go further, both of them to go further in the postseason. Unfortunately, only one is going to advance. And I think the Jays, the tail of the tape for me with them is that they continue to have an offense that looks much more like a prototypical Astros offense that was true a year ago. It's true this year as well. Sub 20% K rate, big time offensive production, lots of power. We're seeing that through the second half. I mean, right there among the league leaders in terms of team WRC plus.
Best WRC plus in baseball in the last month.
Yeah, they are also the kind of team, just again, this is a very soft factor, but maybe it's because reading this story recently, the Jays' home field advantage seems bigger than most. Getting to play any and all of these games at home seems like a pretty big deal for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, travel's a big deal. Traveling across, time zones has been proven to be a big part of home field advantage. So they're making the Mariners fly pretty far, and that is going to be a factor for sure. I also just like their offense a lot better than the Mariners offense. For example, over that same 30 days, Seattle is the 6th best offense, and that's seems a little bit soft to me. I don't know. Like sometimes I look at that lineup and against certain matchups and with certain people hurt, I just feel like it doesn't go deep enough. Rotation wise, there's a lot of stuff I like in Seattle. I think Robbie Ray, Logan Gilbert, that's a great combo. Luis Castillo, I think might be the best pitcher, among the two staffs, among the two starting staffs here. So I want to take Seattle's, but Alek Manoah is going to go toe-to-toe with Luis Castillo in game 1. And if there's any sort of deciding factor, there's going to be either the Toronto offense or the Seattle bullpen. If Seattle can come out to a 1-run lead or something, they might be able to shut the door. I can tell stories where Mariners win. You know what I mean?
I think it's possible to do that with any playoff series,
Yeah.
regardless of length. But even a 3-game series with almost any 2 teams, you can tell yourself, oh, this is how it would happen. This is how this team would win. I hope we get a Gausman-Ray matchup, given that was a decision that was actually made
Yeah,
in the
right.
offseason, right? And Robbie Ray had one great season with the Jays, ended up going to Seattle on that multi-year deal. Kevin Gausman going to Toronto. I mean, these were 2 guys that every team that was looking for pitching this offseason put side by side. So to put them up
Similar
against each other
deals.
on a big stage would be pretty exciting.
Similar deals. And then, yeah, if that lines up that way, then it's Gilbert. I've got the Toronto one. Caitlin McGrath was kind enough to tell me. It'll be Manoah, Gausman, Stripling with Berrios as the safety blanket.
Yeah, given the way his season has gone, I think making him more of the extra guy for this series makes sense.
I think I take Castillo over Manoah, but that's, I think, almost a pick 'em. I take Gausman over Ray, and I take Gilbert over Stripling.
I'm with you for sure on Gilbert over Stripling. Those are all good pitching matchups. Those are all really nice. This is going to be a fun series. It's going to be a fun weekend overall. I think there are a few questions that we still don't have clear answers to as it pertains to the health of this Mariners team. Julio Rodriguez, how healthy is he? Yes, he's back from the IL. Yeah, he's going to play, but is he close to 100% healthy at this point?
Yeah, it's a question. Cal Raleigh was dinged up. Eugenio Suarez broke the tip of his finger. So there's definitely some questions there.
Winker's banged up right now.
Yeah, another thing that's weird for me is if I don't look at any numbers, I would think that the Mariners have a top 3 bullpen in the league.
They do, probably based on your pitching model. They don't based on results.
It's strange. By WAR, they're where were they? I had them a second ago. 13th this year.
That just doesn't make sense when you watch that group of relievers. That's not indicative of what would happen, especially if you can shorten up and pick your 3 best, most rested relievers on any given day during the postseason. That to me is like a case where if you talk about A bullpens and B bullpens, their A bullpen should stack up fine against anybody.
I do think that it's like they've got a guy, Anthony Misuitz, who's got a 5 K9 against a 4 walk for 9 that put 13 innings in, right? Drew Steckenrider had a tough year this year. He had a 6 K9. So, and that's 27 innings. And then you kind of like look through some of the guys they've shuffled through and they haven't been amazing. If you just focus on the very top, and put away the 45 innings from Tommy Malone, Ryan Borucki, and Sergio Romo this year, and instead focus on Swanson, Matt Brash, since he's been back in the bullpen, Andres Munoz, Paul Sewald, and Penn Murphy, the guys that they're going to go into the season with, you're looking at over a 10 K9, maybe even an 11 K9 with something like 2 walks per 9. I mean, that's nasty right there. And those guys are all nasty in different ways, where Andres Munoz brings the 100, Matt Brash brings the elite slider, Penn Murphy is coming from down under almost, and Paul Sewald looks like he's coming from down under, but is actually over the top. And then having Diego Castillo in there, as almost the 5th or 6th best reliever, I don't know. I'm taking that Seattle bullpen very squarely over the Blue Jays bullpen.
These teams are pretty comparable just in terms of their overall defensive ability. I think that's probably a wash in that corner. If you're looking at outs above average, looking at runs prevented by StatCast, I mean, is there anything you see that separates them defensively?
I know that some of the Fangraphs numbers don't like Julio Rodriguez in center, and I don't get it. I think he's a very good center fielder. Maybe there's some questions long term, but the bat's going to play, and I'm not right now. Yeah, I see it as pretty good teams. JP Crawford has weirdly gone from being one of the top defenders in the league to one of the bottom at shortstop, and I wonder if it's a trick of the numbers. Very rarely do you see a guy who has a really good reputation go from being really good to really, really bad in the numbers without, an injury or something, and I don't think we've really had a reported injury for JP Crawford. So I'm going to look past those numbers and call him an excellent shortstop and put them on par with each other defensively. So I think that one, you put that away. You put the bullpen squarely in Seattle's pocket. You put the starting rotation. I'm saying Seattle, but
yeah, it could be a push.
And then you give the lineup to the Blue Jays.
And that's, to me, even if you pick sides in the other areas, it's close everywhere. But I think there is a bigger gap in terms of how the offenses are built between these two teams. That's the biggest advantage that either team has in any facet of the game when you break them down side by side. I think that's the difference for me. So I don't.
The bullpen one, man, it's close, but you also don't know how much of a difference that'll be. Like, what if Manoah, Gausman, and Stripling all go 7 each? It's not impossible.
No, it's not.
I know. Now I'm telling stories. I'm telling stories again. I know, but these are stories that have been told before, right? You're talking about like the Nationals. How did they get there? They relied heavily on their starting pitchers, so their bullpen didn't matter as much. That's why an advantage in the bullpen sounds like during the season, you're like, oh yeah, bullpen's really important. You're getting 4+ innings, maybe 4.5 innings out of your bullpen. Really, really important. In any given game, you could only get 1 inning. And then it's not as important.
Yeah, you push things a little bit differently in these circumstances. And I know Ross Stripling has had a great season. I've liked Ross Stripling for a long time. I've liked him even back when he was sort of the extra guy for the Dodgers.
But he's not going 7.
I don't think he's going 7. I'll wear it. I'll take the L if he goes 7 in a game.
Well, then he's got Barrios.
Yeah, I do think this is a Jays team where the pitching depth could be a little vulnerable in a longer series.
They would love to win it in 2, yeah.
That was
rest everybody and then win the first 2 games of the next series.
That would be the ideal outcome for them. Winner of this series, of course, heads to Houston. So I'm gonna take Toronto. I think this is gonna be an amazing series. And again, like I said up top, I am sad that one of these teams won't get to play beyond the weekend.
Have you said that all of these are going to be amazing series?
Probably, because I think they are.
Which one is going to be? Which one's going to just be terrible?
The series most likely to be terrible.
The series most likely to be terrible. I'm sorry. I'm gonna throw it on Cleveland and Tampa, because run suppression. I'm sorry, is not as fun to watch.
It's also
the
series that has the shortest list of star level players. I mean, I know Jose Ramirez is great. He's a phenomenal player. Probably underrated.
Can be white hot.
Right. But
then you've got some standout starting pitchers, and then the list of, national level awareness stars is over.
Every other team in the postseason, or at least playing in these wild card matchups, the other 6 teams all either spend a lot of money or were really aggressive trying to get a lot better this year. And I think from a general how's the sport doing perspective, I feel like that needs to be rewarded more often, right? As much as we can be in awe of the frugal teams and their efficiency at winning games, I want players to get paid. I want
teams to get better at the deadline.
I want teams to be aggressive at the deadline. I want that behavior to be rewarded. So maybe that's part of why I would also say Guardians Rays, they match up really well. It could be a fun series to watch, but of these series, it's going to be the most different. The other 3 might look similar to each other, but that series is just going to play out a bit different. Probably the lowest scoring by far of all of them.
Yeah. And the highest scoring will be this one, even though there's good pitching.
This one should be. Yeah, I think Cardinals-Phillies probably second highest scoring. I
No,
think
I'm going to go
because of
Cardinals-Phillies highest.
I'm going to put Cardinals-Phillies second on this one. I think the Jays are going to put up some runs. The Mariners can do it too. So I think that's going to be a better offensive series than people might expect in some instances. Which side of this one are you actually on?
You
tried to get away, didn't you?
I did. I tried to get away. Blue Jays. Sorry, Seattle.
I know. I really want you to go far, Seattle. I hope I'm wrong. I'm wrong all the time. If you'd like,
I really want Seattle, Philadelphia, and San Diego to win. Like I'm not like that sounds like rooting, and I'm not supposed to root, but I think it's okay. I'm not. It's 3 teams, so it's not like I'm rooting for them. Like I'm rooting for them to win. It's more about like congratulations, man. Like it's been so long, and it's been a tough road, and so it'd be really great to throw a series win on there. And I think I picked against all 3.
Yeah, I mean, I want the Rays to win that series, but I think Cleveland's going to win it. I like watching Shane McClanahan pitch as much as anybody in the league right now. So if you say, who do you want to watch play further into the season of all those players? Glasnow, healthier Glasnow. The longer the Rays stay in the postseason, the deeper he's going to pitch into games because he's stretching out. That's pretty exciting.
I think it's Fairbanks and Adam in that bullpen. That's it. So we'll see. Maybe they'll have someone step forward in that bullpen and be like, oh yeah, I forgot about that dude.
That's sort of their thing.
That's their thing. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we at least got one prediction each right out of 4 series. Hoping for one. That would be great.
I'm doing picks again if you want to follow on The Athletic and laugh at how bad I am.
theathletic.com/baseball show. If you don't have a subscription, $1 a month for the first 6 months. That'll get you playoff coverage. It'll get you off-season coverage. It'll get you the beginning of next season. That's 6 months. That's that far away. It's pretty amazing. So get that at theathletic.com/baseball show. You can find Eno on Twitter at Eno Saris. You can find me at Derek Van Riper. The Athletic Baseball Show returns on Friday.
You've always got the green light here.